Funding for Austin Business Matters was provided by DivisionX Incorporated, where e-commerce meets e-marketing. Today's episode is Crowdfunding, Top 10 Most Important Things to Know, with Holty Martin, hosted by Dr. Atola Etamadi. Welcome to Austin Business Matters, the show for inventors and entrepreneurs to help you succeed in your business. I'm your host, Atola Etamadi. On today's show, I have the pleasure of the company of Holty Martin, who is the founder of the Texas Entrepreneur Network Funding Forum. Welcome to the show, Hol.
Thank you for having me.
Please, could you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Well, I came to Austin back in 1984. Back then, there was 500,000 people. And went to graduate school and afterwards went to work for National Instruments. And that company went IPO in 1995, and I started doing angel investing after that. And we had an angel group here in the 90s called the Capital Network, and they ran from 95 to 2002, and I made an investment in that, and I lost all my money. But I still liked investing in early stage companies and wanted to work with early stage deals. And so in 2006, the Austin Chamber did a restart of the angel network here called the Central Texas Angel Network. And so I signed up as the first member. And as the first member, you're automatically on the board in charge of membership. It's an honor. There's no pay, but it's an honor. And I did that for 2 years. And 2 months into it, we lost our director. So I became the director. And we got about $5 million invested in 20 deals. And we got a 7x return out of one of the deals. And that part-time job turned into a full-time job. So I stepped out, and I got a bunch of hours back, and I helped start 2 other angel networks in the area, the Baylor Angel Network out of the University in Waco, and then I also helped start the Wilco Angel Network out of Williamson County. And then I noticed that a lot of people were coming to the Central Texas Angel Network, and as entrepreneurs, they weren't being successful with the process, so I started what was called the Austin Entrepreneur Network, partnered up with a guy who had a paper magazine called the Business District, and he was moving that online about the time I wanted an entrepreneur network, and so we put the 2 ideas together and came up with an online magazine we called the Austin Entrepreneur Network. And we cataloged all the resources in Austin back in 2009, of which there were 125 for startups. It was quite a bit. And we had a very heavily trafficked page on our website that showed all the resources, and we had a lot of interest. And over the years, we did networking activities and mentoring activities, but funding was the thing that people kept coming back to over and over again. And so over time, we decided to go ahead and just focus on funding. And for a while, we were taking angel groups across the state, and then we tried funding forums. We did that across the state as well. And we did quite well. We raised over $100 million with our funding forum series that went throughout the state. Fortunately, it's a big state. We were driving everywhere, and so when crowdfunding came along, we said, well, that's the answer. Let's move all of the deal flow online and let investors source the deals online. But since we're all here in the state, you can still go follow up afterwards. And that's how we came to change Austin Entrepreneur Network into the Texas Entrepreneur Network. And now we're a full-time funding portal that offers 9 different sources of funding for startups and growth companies here in Texas.
So you, in a sense, you had your baptism of fire, and you learned a lot from that, and then you found out what the thing was that you wanted to focus on. But where did this crowdfunding come from? How did it come about, and what is it exactly?
Well, back in the 90s, we actually had venture capitalists were the king of the funders. And back in the 90s, people needed $5 million to start a web company. Most people today don't believe me when I say that, but the reality is back then you had to build your own server farm, you had to pay American wages for everything, you had to buy everything. So it was very expensive to start a company. And then over the years, the cost of doing business went down, and so $5 million turned into $500,000 is what people needed in the mid-2000s. So when we started CTAN, that was, the deal flow basically downshifted from the VC world into the angel world. So the angel world started to grow very big, while the VC world started to shrink because they had fewer deals.
So at what point is it an angel funding, attracted to an angel funder, and at what point is it that you would go to a VC to raise that funding?
Angels are normally investing in growth companies that are needing $250,000 to $2 million. VCs are coming in at $1 million and going north after that. So as you need less money, you need more of an angel than a VC.
And where does crowdfunding come in? Does it come in below angels? Is it at a level below an angel investor?
That's right. As the cost of business keeps going down, now what we're finding is that you can start a good company for $50,000 or less. Well, that's more of a crowdfunder as well. Back in the 90s, the venture capitalists considered angels to be the seed investor, and then they were the professional investor. Over time, angels have gotten more sophisticated. They're now the professional investor, and the crowdfunder is the seed investor. And so in the financial world, everybody moves up and to later stage deals, and that's what is happening. As deals need less and less money, they're evolving out to a broader group of people to find the fundraise, hence the rise of crowdfunding.
And did crowdfunding come into being because of the 2008 crash, or did it exist before that?
I think the 2008 crash really propelled it on. Before that, there was plenty of funding to be had from banks and other sources, but after 2008, banks lost the ability to invest in anything risky, and the startups are certainly risky business, and so they were not allowed to invest. Now there's this whole group of people that need to find funding someplace, and in not finding it in the banks, they're now reaching out to family, friends, and the crowd in general, and tools like Kickstarter, AngelList, and other websites popped up to service that.
And how has that affected the whole marketplace? Has it made some VCs just disappear, or has it actually increased the number of VCs out there? How has it affected the rest of the marketplace?
I think it improves the ability for later stage firms to fund deals, because there's now a lot more market validation and testing. It used to be when you walked into an angel group, they would ask, how did you do with your customers? Now they ask, how did you do in your crowdfunding campaign? And so it gives an element of validation to your product if you can go crowdfund it, as opposed to waiting till we'll see if somebody buys it or not.
What sort of things are appropriate for crowdfunding? Is it just about anything, or is it software, or is it physical products? What kind of things do best in a crowdfunding platform?
I think it originally started with projects and physical goods because people could look at that and see what it was. Over time, though, we're seeing it expand out and cover just about everything. It can be software, it can be science, it can be research, just about anything can be crowdfunded today.
And what are the different types of crowdfunding? Is it just equity, or just donations? What are the various different types of it?
Well, yeah, the number of or the types of crowdfunding are also expanding. Originally, it was reward style, which was prepaying for something, and then donations came into it. But now we're seeing equity, and we're seeing variations on equity crowdfunding as well. The state of Texas recently passed its own intrastate crowdfunding law that lets anybody, not just accredited investors, have an equity stake in a startup. It's a smaller amount that they can invest, but now we're seeing more investments coming in because more people are allowed to invest.
And is there a sort of a limit to that, what an individual person can invest in a given deal, or is it unlimited?
Well, every state is passing their own version of the interstate law, but here in Texas, the limitation is $5,000 per person per year per startup. So if you are a non-accredited investor, you can invest in as many different startups as you want, but up to $5,000 each.
And just a matter of interest, do you happen to have any idea of the statistics in terms of like return on investment for crowdfunding compared with, let's say, putting it in a high interest bank, CD or something like that?
Well, from the Kickstarter days, we learned that about 45% of the deals seeking crowdfunding actually raised money. Didn't say they raised all the money they want, but they did raise some money. And then that compares very favorably against angel-funded deals, of which the average is around 15%, or even better than VC deals, of which the average is around 1%. So as the amount you're raising goes down and the number of people that can fund it goes up, you're getting a better success rate all around.
So is there, in terms of return on investment, let's say I invest $1,000, is it a risky thing to invest in crowdfunding portals? I mean, is it like a 1% return on investment if I'm investing $1,000 into, let's say, 10 different ones, or is it more like the likelihood is 20% return on investment, or is it unknown? It just depends on it.
It varies quite a bit, but I found it interesting back in the VC days. Only 25% of the VC funds ever made money. I go back to my early days of CTAN, only 25% of the deals returned a positive exit. And so when people ask me what will be the success rate of crowdfunders, 25% of the deals will turn a positive return. Keeps coming back to my mind because just letting more people invest doesn't necessarily change the rate of success of those startups. Startups are still very risky, but when I go back and look at it, 75% fail, 25% succeed, and if your 25% can outweigh your 75% failures, well, then you have a positive return overall.
So nothing essentially has changed in terms of the how you invest. You still have to do your due diligence. You still have to figure out if your money is wisely invested. It's not some sort of magic, but the crowdfunding isn't some kind of magic thing where you can just put your money in there and guarantee a return.
The way I explain that to people is fundraising, the principles of fundraising have not changed. They are still the same. As an entrepreneur, you must have a product, you must have a network, you must run a campaign. And as an investor, you must do your due diligence, you must be careful, and you must monitor it very well. What's changed are the formats that we're now using. We're now using online tools. You must have a pitch video. You must interact very well through the email and through web interfaces as opposed to just in person. You now are accessing a lot more people that can invest in your deal, but consequently you're getting smaller amounts from each one. So you're dealing with a larger group of people. So the dynamics are a little bit different from that point of view, but the principles are still the same.
So as far as an inventor or an entrepreneur is concerned, what is the process for getting your idea or your invention? What would be your advice on how to make sure that it succeeds, your campaign succeeds, your crowdfunding campaign succeeds?
Well, the first one is you can choose from a platform. There's many platforms out there. When I go to groups today, I ask how many portals do you have to choose from, and the answer ranges anywhere from 5 to 50. The answer is closer to over 2,000. There's over 2,000 portals you can choose from out there, and this time next year, I would not be surprised if there's not 20,000 portals to choose from. Because portals are fundamentally websites, and it's not hard to put up a website. But the key to success is running a campaign and engaging a strong network. So when you run a campaign, you have to have very compelling material about why somebody should invest in your deal, support your project. And you must have a network to back it. Whenever you go to outside investors or investors you don't know, the first thing that they're going to look for is, did your network support it? And if your network is strongly behind it, that says a lot about your product and about your team, and others will take notice of that.
And what size of network is appropriate? Do you need to 10 people investing in your product to start off with? Is that a sufficient number for you to go, or do you have to build up a following of, let's say, hundreds before you take it to the crowdfunding portal?
It depends on how much you're trying to raise and the average amount that they put in. When those who are raising accredited investor money on our portal come to us, we say you need to be building an investor prospect list, just like a sales prospect list, of about 40 or 50 people at some point. Most people are bringing 5 or 10 people to the table, and our job is to grow that list to 50. And at the end of the day, 10 to 15% will write a check. And so you can do the math on that to figure out if the average check is $20K, how many of those do we need? How big of a network do we need? So you can work your way back to figure out how big a network you need to engage at some point.
Can you buy these lists, or are they something that you actually have to build up yourself?
Well, that's what crowdfunding portals do, is you're getting access to their investors through their portal. It used to be that entrepreneurs would go from angel group to angel group, and it would take about 3-4 months for each group to figure out. Today, entrepreneurs go from portal to portal, and it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to figure out what the response is going to be. And that's why it's important to have a strong campaign program, because you can then run that over and over again as you go from portal to portal, or network of investors to network of investors.
And you mentioned that these pitch videos are an important feature. Is a typical expenditure on a pitch video what is quite a lot sometimes? But does it have to be like a Hollywood production, or can it be like a simple thing as long as you're getting the message across?
They only need to be about 2 minutes long, because that's about the average watch time on it. And what investors are doing is they're going through these portals and they're hitting the play button on the videos, and in 1 minute or less they want you to come up and explain what you're doing. And about half of what they're doing is figuring out what you do, and the other half is, are you a credible team to take this forward? And then you have another minute that you can use to leverage the video medium to show the product demo, highlight the problem you're trying to solve, etc. And in about 2 minutes, the investor's getting an idea, yes, I'm interested, I want to learn more, or no, I'm not. And the video is important because they're using that as a way to figure it out rather than trying to read it from all the verbiage on the screen.
And what size of team is a viable size of team for an investor to put their money in?
Well, at the early stage, we always encourage people to get a complete team, and a complete team is two people, someone selling it and someone building it. And they may not be both founders, they may not be both full-time, but the idea is you have both sides of those equations covered. No fair, both two people building it and nobody selling it, because investors will shy away from that kind of deal.
So is a larger team more attractive or less attractive? If you have 15 people in your team, for example.
If you get too many people on the team, now we're worried about how much money we need to keep everybody engaged. In an early stage company, you have to be able to pay for people out of the revenue as you go forward, not just out of investor cash. So if you get too many people on the payroll too soon, that will be a negative. But if you have a vision of bringing more people on and they're waiting in the wings until you can support them, well, that's a very good message, because now we know who's going to come and when they're going to come, and that gives a lot of credibility to the plan.
Can you give me an example of a funding campaign that really worked well, especially for your portal? An example of a product or a service that really took off.
Well, we had a Texas Bourbon come in the other day, and they had a lead investor, they had a product, they had initial revenue, and they already had some investors from their own network. We were able to put them on our website and very quickly get more people to follow on, because there was that much momentum. The product is in the market, customers are buying it, investors are already in it, the terms are already set, and when you get that much momentum, other investors really like to jump on board. When deals come to us and they don't quite have a product in the market, they don't have any revenue, there's no investors up there, well, now we have a lot of momentum to create and build. There's nothing to ride on. Crowdfunding is fundamentally a following process. It's not a leading process. Someone comes to me without a lead investor, we're usually working for a little bit of time to get a lead investor lined up before we really go broad to the crowd.
And what sort of products really work well? I've heard that there's been quite an increase in the number of real estate crowdfunding investments. Why is that? Is that particularly suitable to crowdfunding?
Well, real estate does very well on crowdfunding portals because it's very quantitative. The terms are well known, the property is well known, you can go and see the property, and there's just a lot of quantitative elements that go into it. It produces this much income, this much equity. Startups tend to be a little bit more qualitative. You're trying to figure out the quality of the team and how strong the market is and what direction the market's going to go, and so it can be a little bit more challenging with startups. But anything that's quantitative in that nature, oil and gas, real estate, for example, do very well in crowdfunding.
And what's been the most money earned by a crowdfunding campaign? Is it like millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars? What was it?
The most successful crowdfunding campaign actually came out of Austin, and it is called Star Citizen. And it is a video game maker here that several years ago raised $6 million, partly on Kickstarter, partly on their own website. And that's also a viable crowdfunding portal, is your own website. 98% of all funds you ever get from a crowdfunding campaign are going to come from your network, not somewhere else. So why not put on your website? And over the years, what Star Citizen did was they kept engaging the audience to donate or invest into the games in exchange for changing how the game was developed, having their name placed on a piece or a level inside the game, and engaging the audience very effectively into it. But they're up to $72 million money raised for it, and it's probably the model going forward for all artistic works or creative works, films, etc., where you go out to a crowd, they invest, but then they get to participate at some level into the project itself. I think that's going to be the future for sure. And
are there specific portals, for example, for computer games, films, medical products, or is it just like a general, each one of them can do anything?
Yeah, so our portal is Texas-based, and so we cover anything in Texas. And so we have a page for real estate. We're putting a page together for oil and gas, and then, of course, we have about 50 startups on the website raising funding as well. So we have our focus on the state. But there are portals out there that focus on film projects, some that focus on video game projects and other things. And so you'll see as time goes on that more and more the portals will become more specific in what they offer so they can attract the right people.
What's been the most successful product on your portal?
I think the one we helped raise the most for was Funware. They came in the other day, and They have been in the market for several years, had quite a bit of presence. They're a mobile app maker, and they did a very good job in raising funding for their last round of fundraising. And it worked because so many people knew who they were already. They had a great reputation, and they had some very attractive terms. So they did well.
What about physical products? Presumably that's a software product.
That was a software product. Physical products, I'd say the Texas Bourbon was one of the best ones we've did. Because alcohol deals do very well these days. They have very high margins. People know how that works, and there's a move toward craft distilleries, and it's a strong trend in this area.
Is there any particular invention that was like new and different that raised a lot of money? Because I would imagine it's very difficult to, if it's something new and not in the market before, very difficult to get people behind it because they don't know what it is. I heard about some kind of pizza thing. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, we have a raise on our site where they've got a laminated piece of paper that you put under a pizza, and it pulls 8 grams of fat out of the pizza. And it keeps grease from getting on the box, so you can recycle the box, and then you can take the stitzy, they call it, and actually recycle that by itself. And so it pulls a lot of fat out of foods, and it can be used not only in pizza, but other kinds of foods as well. It's got a patent on it, and it's got a lot of interest from the pizza vendors to actually keep fat from going down the drains of their restaurant. And so we're seeing a lot of interest in that, because when investors see that, they get it instantly, and they know people will pay for that, and they know that that's going to be a successful product. And so we're seeing a lot of traction behind that one.
Is that actually in the marketplace now, or
it's available now? It's a shipping product, and that's one of the nice things about it is there's no technology risk or product risk. The product is finished, it's complete, and ready to go. It's just a matter of getting it deployed through the right channels.
Can you raise funding for just an idea, purely an idea? I mean, is that something legally, or is there anything to stop you just raising for an idea of something? Hey, I'm going to build a better mousetrap. Not necessarily I've actually got a prototype of a better mousetrap. Is that something you can do, or does it have to be something that you've proven can work?
There are some investors that do what are called seed investing, where you're seeding an idea and you can put money in, and typically what people are looking for is the team. If you have a very strong team with a good track record, you can make money off of a certain idea, or raise money for a seed idea to get it off, even if there's not a product or prototype available. But you have to have a very strong team. Most investors, especially angel investors, are more go-to-market investors. They want to invest in something that is got a prototype, got some validation, and now we're taking money to put that into the market and really grow it up. And there's some sense that it's going to be successful based on previous trials.
Have you had any inkling of what is the next step past crowdfunding? Is there like going to move on to mobile devices, so you just click a button and you invest on something, or automated, some kind of automated robotic way of just investing your money into? Because if you're saying there's going to be 20,000 portals, if I just visited one every day and spent 1 minute on it, it's going to be not feasible to visit them all.
Right. Well, the direction it's going is crowdfunding is just getting closer and closer to the product or the service itself. So in the future, when you want to get a product or service, funding will be tied to that almost directly, as opposed to having to go to a bank or go to a separate portal. The portal itself will have the facility for doing fundraising right there with the service itself. And so funding gets closer and closer to what it's actually supporting.
Can somebody outside of Texas invest in a company in Texas that has raised money using from people, residents of Texas? Is it just after I've done my crowdfunding campaign in Texas, I'm stuck with it?
Well, you can actually go do an accredited investor angel raise to take money from anybody, not just Texas residents, going forward in the future. The new interstate crowdfunding law they have here in Texas gives every resident the right to invest, and for that campaign and that raise, it can be only Texas residents. But once that's finished, you can then go do an accredited investor raise or an angel raise and raise more money from anybody, not just Texas residents.
So it's kind of like layers of an onion. You start off with your core people, and then you work your way up. And what's the ultimate? What's the outer layer? Is it the world? You can go to Japan and raise funding there.
That's right. You keep drawing the circle bigger and going further afield from your core network, getting people to join in because they see that's a good opportunity or they want to support that cause in some way. So you always start with yourself, your network, and then grow it out to your customers and then your community, and then keep growing the circle bigger and raising more money. And as long as groups are supporting it and growing it, you can keep going out further and further. If you don't have your money or your family and friends' money, you'll find it very hard to find other people's money to come in. That's the first thing they look for is, how much did you guys invest? And if the answer is none or not much, then it won't go very far with other people.
So what industries has crowdfunding affected? Is it obviously the video industry, but apart from that, has it affected any particular industries and like completely changed the way they do business?
I'd say most industries are undergoing a change now where they're trying to get more funding from the crowd as opposed to specific investment vehicles, because there's many more of them. The laws are changing to let them invest more as well. And then getting more funding from your customer has always been a great opportunity. And one of the great innovations of rewards crowdfunding is that it shows that people, if they are interested in your product, they will pre-buy it. And then if they're going to pre-buy it, they have a good opportunity to also invest in it through equity in a later stage. And so you're more and more reaching out to the broader marketplace to support your product.
And how does ultimately how does the investor collect on their investment? I mean, if I've invested $5,000, can I at some point say, okay, I want my money back, or I want my money back plus interest? How does that work?
So in equity crowdfunding, you get paid back when they sell the business, and in some cases that's taking a longer time than it used to. There's also revenue-based funding where you can get paid back out of the revenue stream, and for some businesses that's a very good option. If you're going to be sold for a large amount of money to a high-tech company down the way, it may be worth waiting with the equity investment. If you're investing in a restaurant or retail deal, it may be better to get paid out of the revenue because there may not be a big sale at the end of the rainbow on that one.
There's actually funding for restaurants. That's something that you've seen actually happen?
Absolutely. We actually have restaurant deals on our site as well, where people are investing and they get a portion in revenue return and a portion in equity in case they sell the business. And we find that very popular. People have some income as well as some equity. That becomes very popular. The other side of it is peer-to-peer lending. And that's just simply sourcing loans through the portal as well, which is another form of crowdfunding, and more that comes here as well.
So one thing that comes to mind is, for example, getting some kind of discount card. So if I go to that restaurant as an investor, I get maybe 10% off what it is off the menu because I'm an investor. Is that something that's possible, that people are doing, or if they're not doing it, why aren't they doing it?
Oh, that's very possible. People are doing that quite a bit. We had a group come in that did a micro craft brewery, and they were doing a rewards or pre-selling of the steins. And then if you were to contribute and buy that stein, you would get a % off of the beer when you came in every day thereafter, which over the lifetime of it could be a very lucrative deal. So the idea is you can incentivize people to be investors, and then people get discounts or they get other benefits along the way to encourage them to be a part of the team.
It seems to me, and I might be, barking up the wrong tree here. It seems to me that having a channel, if you like a TV channel, like a QVC kind of TV channel for crowdfunding, would be something that should have happened already. I mean, there's all these videos, but you would think that a dedicated channel just to this type of product or service would have been there already. Do you happen to know why it's not, or is that something that's just not going to work in that format?
I think that's the direction it's going. So many of the crowdfunding portals have so much video, so much content that they are in essence their own channel online. And so more and more content is being curated into a magazine or news format that makes it look interesting. We actually did that with our newsletter. We turned it into an innovations channel where people can log on and read about innovations going on, and it is basically crowdfunding videos that show off new innovations that are going on here. So tremendous amounts of content are being created, and it's just a matter of curating and positioning it in the right way that it would be a QVC-like approach.
Because, I mean, there are shows like American Idol, there's Shark Tank, and this just seems to be perfect for some kind of show that's a mixture of the two, halfway in between the two. And I thought maybe there's some kind of reason. The reason it hasn't been there because some sort of legal issues with it or something like that. It's just purely just haven't got around to it.
That's right. The industry is doubling every year in the amount of dollars going into it. But over time, that's going to be repurposed as content that, in another way, that would showcase great opportunities that are out there already.
You know this video game that you said $75 million that started off in Austin.
That's right.
Has that reached its end of life, or is it still going?
It's still going, and it keeps adding more and more. The beauty of a video game is you can always add more levels and add more versions to it. There really is no end to it as long as you have a paying public for it, and that's where they keep going with it.
What if it's some kind of show or risky business? Let's say I was going to say I'm going to dive off some high board into Niagara Falls or something. Would that be something that's appropriate for crowdfunding? That's kind of you just do it because you'd want to invest in something exciting, not because you're getting any kind of return for your investment. You're just going to see something amazing happen. Does that happen? Yeah,
people get excited about the concept or the idea or a donation campaign, and when they get emotionally involved, quite a few people will put money into something because they want to be a part of that concept or promote that idea, even though there's no financial return. And that's where a lot of crowdfunding originally came for. It was really about supporting somebody's project as opposed to investing in somebody's business. And so that's certainly a part of crowdfunding as well.
So from an investor point of view, what would be your advice to an investor on a crowdfunding site? What would you tell them to look out for, or should they go and filter out these thousands of deals to reach one that they're happy with?
Well, as an angel investor, what I discovered at the end of the years of experience is that it almost always comes back to the team. I talked to a venture capitalist once and I asked, what do you look for? He says, I look for three things. I look for the team, I look for a strong team, and I look for a great team. And so it always comes back to the team. And so I think in the interest that fundraising has not changed, it's still the same. If you're ever investing in anything, you look first and foremost at the team, because at the end of the day, products change, markets come and go, but it's the team that you want to back, because a good team will find a way to succeed at some level and in some way.
How do you judge the effectiveness of a team when you're just seeing their pictures? Is that where the video comes in, or some kind of belief in their involvement in the project?
Well, you look at the history of the team and the individuals, and the beauty of social media today is there's usually a pretty rich trail of what the team has done in the past, and you look for completeness of team, and then you look for, do they have the right skill sets to do the project. They have a saying in the angel world, you want to look for the A team working on a B-level project. So they're just going to knock it out of the park. It may not be a huge win, but the idea is they will probably succeed if you've got the right team on it.
Right, it's kind of like, from what you tell me, it's sort of like horse racing. You look at you look at what the horses have done in previous races and so on, and you base your estimates on how they're going to perform afterwards on how they did previously. Now, what would be the number one thing, or how would you advise an inventor or an entrepreneur to go about getting? What's your advice to them for getting on the portal and succeeding?
Well, the key thing that helps with a startup is, number one, they've got a product with some strong market validation. You've proven that people will pay for it. And most people will come in with the vision that somebody will pay for it, but they really don't have any evidence of it. So you want to go and make sure that you have strong market validation. Purchase orders in hand, customers saying, I'm ready to buy it. Those help quite a bit. And then number two is you want to start building up your network sooner rather than later. If you needed money at the beginning of March, for example, starting February 28th is not a good time to do that. I always advise you start 6 months in advance. And what you do is you go out to potential investors and you say, well, I'm not raising funding today, but in 6 months I will be. Can I keep you informed of my progress? And then start that educational process of every month, telling them what you're doing, showing your traction, showing how you hit milestones. And so when you get 6 months down the road, they know very much about your project. They've seen you make good progress on it. And then when you come in saying, now I'm raising funding, you got the educational curve behind you and you're really ready to start fundraising.
So it's not a rapid, like 1 week thing where you can just put your product on there and it magically gets a lot of people buying it.
Well, they say in sales it takes 7 touches to close a sale, a large one. Well, so it takes 7 touches to close the investor. And most entrepreneurs go out and pitch an investor, and then they don't hear back, and so they mistakenly assume the investor's not interested. But I always tell them the investor doesn't know if they're interested or not. They're still trying to figure out what you've got. You have to have 6 more interactions before the investor has enough information that they feel like they can make a decision, yes, I'm interested, or no, I'm not. And then just like sales, only 10% of the prospects ever turn into actual customers. Well, the same is going to be true of investors. The majority of people will never write a check, but you just don't know where it's going to come from, and you must cast the net fairly wide in order to find the ones that will work with you.
So for a reasonably successful campaign, how much would you, in terms of time and money, what would you need? Obviously not millions of dollars, but what's this kind of like a ballpark figure for what I would need to create a good campaign, and in terms of time, how many weeks or months it would take?
Well, my rule of thumb is for every $1 million you're trying to raise at the angel level, you need 1 calendar year in which to raise it. And that includes the time to go build your campaign, build your documents, meet your investors, educate the investors, close the investors, get the doc signed. It's a year to do $1 million, especially on the first round. Now, if you sold your last 3 companies for $20 million each, you can probably go a lot faster. But the vast majority of us haven't done that, and so we're back to the $1 million year, 1 year raise limit that goes into it. It doesn't take a lot of dollars to go build these campaigns or markets, but it does take time for sure.
So is it like $5,000 a realistic investment in a crowdfunding campaign, or is that way under or way over?
Yeah, it shouldn't take much more than that as far as dollars goes, because most of the money goes into actually building the business. And depending upon the business you have, it will take different amounts of money. If you're doing a life science business, it will take quite a bit to get your company well down the road. If you're doing a mobile app, it'll take a lot less. And so it varies quite a bit how much you have to put in the business. But as far as fundraising goes, it shouldn't take more than $5,000 to put that together.
Are larger companies also doing the crowdfunding for projects with the in-house projects that they might otherwise have gone and raised equity from somewhere else?
Well, more and more companies are using crowdfunding to test market the product before it goes out. In fact, I'd say half of all reward campaigns today are no longer about fundraising. They're about market validation, positioning, branding, awareness, etc. And so more and more big companies are using crowdfunding techniques to test the waters before they spend more time with potential products to go into the market with.
Okay, yeah, I mean that seems to me to be probably the way things are going to go, because you're likely to invest in a company that's already established, has a lot of sales. So if they come to a crowdfunding portal and they have an idea that they put online, that's more likely to succeed because you have all this power behind it. So is that the way things are going, or is that the way things have gone already?
I think more and more it goes that way every day. You have to go out, and if you can get a market for your product, you can then get follow-on funding for it as well. If you can't get anyone using your product to begin with, then there's really no reason to go to the funding level. But once you have a strong market behind it, you have more options today than you used to for crowdfunding as well.
How many, just as a matter of interest, how many crowdfunding portals are there in Austin or in Texas itself? Is it dozens or?
There was 11 that signed up for the Intrastate portal, and about half have gotten the exemption signed off so far, and it won't take long to get more. But I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't 100 at the end of the year up and running, given the number of investors here. There's 26 million citizens in the state, and the number of industries that are here. Texas is about 10% of the country, and it is a land unto itself. And so it's the first big market to actually have an interstate crowdfunding law. So we're actually getting calls from people out of the state that want to move here because we have a crowdfunding law in place that they can use while the Jobs Act on the federal level is still going through a sign-off process.
Do any government bodies themselves look for crowdfunding for government projects, or is that something that's not allowed or not something they do?
But more and more, I think you'll see government bodies using crowdsourcing techniques to identify potential laws, solutions to laws, etc. Even patent patent offices is starting to look at crowdsourcing for reviewing patent applications to get the wisdom of the crowds coming into it. It may not be funding it, but they're still using a lot of the same techniques. Crowdfunding leads to crowdsourcing, which leads to the sharing economy, and so that's where it ultimately goes.
Well, I wish we had more time to talk about this because I think it's absolutely fascinating and it's such a burgeoning and growing area. I really appreciate that you came and talked to us about it. It was a pleasure having you.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching Austin Business Matters. I'm your host, Atul Latamadi. I hope you will watch us next time.